Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of the Red Special Meetup, we are honoured today to be with all of the guests that we've had, but we're now going to have a chat with Justin Shirley Smith, who is the senior producer of Queen Productions and has been working with Queen since 1984?
Yeah.
Since 1984. So Justin has joined us today! Thank you so much for coming, Justin.
You're welcome.
I just want to point out our dear friend who couldn't make it today because of travel arrangements, Gerben, arranged for Justin to come. So I take no credit for Justin attending. Gerben did that all on his own. So thank you, Gerben, if you're watching. Justin, thank you for coming. As I said, you've been with Queen now for 36 years. How did you get into it originally?
Well, I got a job at the studio that they own in Montreal, in Switzerland. Well, owned, they don't own it. They sold it in '93 to Dave Richards. And I was just looking for jobs in studios in London, in fact, because I grew up just down the road in Marlborough, which is that way, down the A4. And I was just looking for work in London studios and just applied to all of them like everybody did at that time. And through a family connection, someone knew or lived next door to Jim Beach, and they told him that this young lad was looking for a job, and he said, well, we need someone in Switzerland. So I went for an interview with him, and that was the job I got. So it's pretty, and they were looking for an English person because the working clientele were English or English speaking at least. So that was the initial thing.
So at a young age you then fly off to Montreal as a youngster?
Yeah, I was pretty much straight out of school really. I mean, well, yeah, 6 months after leaving school, I think. February '84.
You obviously, were you aware of Queen at that point, and did you know what you were letting yourself in for, or?
Oh yeah, very much. I was in a band at school, played guitar, and I was into all kinds of things, including Queen, but all sorts of other things, Beatles and Stones and all the rest of it. So I wasn't really focused on Queen, but I liked them, a lot, and had records. Yeah.
That's all right. I forgot what I asked you. You were aware of Queen, obviously, at that point, going for the job. So
yeah.
You fly into Montreal, and then what do they get you to start working on as a young man?
So I just went in as what they called a tape operator. And so you just go and you're expected to run the tape machine and also make tea and do all the rest of it. Like a runner on a TV or film set. And the first client, when I went in there, the first client was Chris Rea, because it was a commercial studio. Queen owned it, but they rented it out to anybody who wanted it. And Chris Rea was the guy who was working in there at the time, and Dave Richards was chief engineer. And yeah, so that was the first thing. And then the next thing was Roger Taylor came in to do Strange Frontier to finish the album. I think he's actually playing that song on his show he's doing right now, if anyone's been to see it.
He kicks off with it.
Yeah, that's right, isn't it? And it sounded great to start with, I think, that song.
It does,
yeah. Yeah, and then David Bowie actually lived down the road, so he came in soon after that to do demos because that was just after Let's Dance, so he's doing demos for his next album, which ended up being called Tonight. Yeah, so it started off quite quickly with lots of people coming in, and I met the band that summer when I went to, they were on tour doing the Works tour. Is that right? Yeah. And they were in Milan, which is quite close, so I just got on the train with the other guys from the studio, and we went over to Milan and watched Queen in Milan, which I think was possibly the first time they ever played there. that's right. But and I met all of them then, apart from Roger, but I met the others at that time as well. So I was like 18 and riding around in limos with the band and stuff. I don't know what the hell was going on.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Not too bad then. And so obviously, I say obviously a lot, but it jump started quite quickly. You ended up meeting the band quite soon on. We're at the Red Special Meetup. Can you remember being told about the story of the guitar and the fact Brian and his father built it? And was that something that ever really talked about, or?
I can't remember whether I already knew that or not. I mean, I don't know. I doubt it's probably not something you really talk about if you're actually involved in it, because then They didn't come in to record as a band until the Miracle sessions, I think. Individually they came in to do things, but it was the Miracle sessions where they came in, and then at that time Jobby was looking after the guitar, and so I became familiar with it and the AC30s and everything then.
This is a bit like hell behind you then.
No, I love them. I mean, ever since I saw pictures of the Beatles, I love these things.
Yeah, good. And so, from there, then you obviously worked your way up through the ranks from being, you call it a runner. How quick was that progression to moving on? Was it the typical apprentice getting sent to make tea, or did they start involving you in the process of recording and teaching you tricks of the trade at an early stage?
Well, I mean, a lot of it is. Dave wasn't a very it wasn't a very structured education, really. I mean, a lot of the education was about what not to do, I think. But we won't go into that. But yeah, I mean, it's all about asking questions, really. Probably in the studio, so why have you done that? Or trying to work out how a compressor works is quite a bit of a challenge from at the very beginning, but it all makes sense after a while. And like the desk, it looks very daunting when you first see it, the console, but once you know that it's just repetition, then it's easy.
So we're getting you involved in that at quite a young age as well.
Yeah, I was thrown in at the deep end because they had. The studio was on the side of the casino, which is a concert venue, where they had the Montreal Jazz Festival. And I think the first few years I was on the stage doing the microphones, because the microphones were used by the PA system and monitors, but also the recording. So Dave and we were kind of in charge of how it was mic'd up. So that was a very good education, learning, because they had every instrument under the sun come through. Incredible musicians of every time, Miles Davis, just everybody. And they also had something called the Montreal Rock Festival, which is like a glorified Top of the Pops. So most of it was live vocal to track, and some of it was completely tracked. But then occasionally they had a couple of bands who would play properly live. And one year, for some reason, Dave wasn't there, and they basically said, right, you're doing it. So, and that's, being dropped in at the deep end is sometimes the best way, isn't it? Just to,
Yeah, definitely. He's certainly
progress.
Certainly challenges you, and it's probably, we all do our best work when we're pushed beyond what we think are our limits. Sometimes we don't realise it at the time. So onwards from there then, and you're starting to learn your trade, so to speak. What point do they come in and you start getting involved in recording Queen songs and working with Brian?
Well, as I say, it was the Miracle sessions, that was the first album they recorded on digital multitrack. Everything before that had been recorded on analog multitrack, 2-inch analog tape, 24 tracks. Apart from the first couple of albums, which is 16, but this was a new digital system at the time. 24 tracks on 2 machines that you could synchronize together and get you could clone things without losing quality, so they did that a lot in order to edit. And, oh, let's add a bar here, take away 2 bars here, etc. So you have to make a whole new copy, and you keep doing that. So you end up with a lot of different. There's a big progression of masters and slaves, and that was the beginning of it. And I think the general idea, and one of the main benefits of Mountain Studios was the big hall, which, as I said, during the Jazz Festival, it was the concert hall, but you could sort of partition off a section of it, which you can see on the inside cover of the Jazz album, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with that picture. That's the room, and it has an incredible drum sound, which you can hear on Innuendo or tracks like that. But you could set up the whole band to play together and get, set them up, and they, rather than set them up in a circle, they were kind of set up on a stage that were all facing the same way. So it really was trying to make it feel like they're playing live, and that was, one of the major benefits of recording there at that time. And so things like for the Miracle album, Was It All Worth It? I think comes out of that. You can hear that in the sound of the track, I think, where they're playing a monstrous riff and everything.
Is that something that you were involved in the process of making that decision to do that? Were you able to?
No, that was, the band. I mean, Dave was co-producer and engineer, and I was assistant engineer. That's how it was credited, that's how it was. I think, I don't know what the credit is, probably produced by Queen, co-produced by Dave Richards. And so, yeah, I mean, they did that, yeah.
Okay.
And it was a good idea, I mean, it worked really well.
Yeah, definitely did when you listened to it. Moving more specifically into Brian May territory and Red Specials in the 1830s, how was that as a process working with Brian and learning how best to capture his sound?
Well, I think from the very beginning, it was just like we put Sennheiser 421s on the AC30, and that's it. And that's kind of what's happened ever since. We've tried all kinds of other things, just for, if he wants to get a different sound. But mostly, he likes it just to be his sound, and then he will use his, pick-up settings and everything to change it, or the way he's touching it, the way he's playing it to get the different sounds. But the sort of background of it is fairly stable, really, and has been, all the way through. I think, as I said, because we were recording as if live, I think probably there were 3 amps there with the whole dry, left and right thing going on. But most of the time it's just 1 amp for recording, because obviously, that system with 3 amps in the chorus is there to kind of try and create a massive wash, or a big wall of sound. But as soon as you record him, and he will often play a rhythm and then immediately double it. So there's 1 each side, and instantly you've got that wall of sound from 2 mono amps. And so really the chorus is just trying to recreate that in a live situation. So you don't need that normally when you're recording.
Yeah.
And he wants to play so many guitars, you can possibly have everything with chorus on. It'd be ridiculous.
And what's that process like working with him when he wants to get so many guitars down? Is there a point where you say, you get to input and say, that's enough now, Brian, or does he go, just 1 more, Justin?
No, I would never say that. I mean, in the days of tape, you'd say, we've run out of tracks. But that doesn't happen anymore. So it just keeps going. I mean, the 20th Century Fox theme, it was a ridiculous amount of tracks. That was just for 1 part, but they were interlocking parts, and each part obviously takes a huge block of, it just looks like a massive block on Pro Tools. I can't remember how many tracks I'd be lying for, so I remember.
Quite a few from them, I can't remember what them
Yeah.
were. Someone in the room will probably remember. No? None of us.
I can find out, but not now.
Yeah. And were you around when he was experimenting with mic positions, like mics in front of the AC30, mics behind ambient room mics?
Oh yeah, well, quite often we would just record with a mic in front, but I think at a certain point, I don't know if it was my idea, but I think I sort of encouraged that, and I always, as soon as I tried it, I wanted to do it all the time. And so I always put a mic behind now, because it gives you so much more power later on to adjust, especially the low end of what you're hearing. You often have to flip the phase on it, but yeah, so I record it independently, like on a stereo track, but not left to right. It's just the front and the back, obviously, at the right level.
And you said you flip the phase, is that the phase of the mic behind?
Yeah, if you don't do that, it just sounds thin.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting, because there's a lot of, I mean, quite a few people in the room, not everyone, have been trying to recreate studio recordings at home for a long time. And there's lots of theories around, you get some questions hopefully, Martin, around mic positions and switching phases and whatnot. It's quite interesting because there's been a long-term theories around. It seems that we're not too far off, which is good to know.
Yeah, I mean, the position at the front is often quite critical, and Brian will, he's been known to get the headphones on, and he wants the hiss cranked up quite loud in the headphones, and then he'll move it around until he likes the sound of the hiss, because it changes it, you know, it changes sound. You can get the right kind of voicing that he's after. But then the one at the back, often it's kind of just put quite randomly, really. I can show you where it is, but then I'll come down 2 days later and someone's just moved it or knocked it, and actually we thought that it sounded great. So, well,
is that a SM57 you stick on the back?
Yeah, mostly, yeah. Yeah, I mean.
And with the, sorry, you're
Go for
right.
it.
With the MD421, do you have that on the M setting?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I always check, and it's never moved.
No. So you don't do anything about the proximity effect because it's so close to the cone. You don't need to. Is that right?
It's just the sound he likes. I mean, yeah. So no.
Do you know what he's looking for in the hiss?
Well, I mean, it's sort of it's a bit like a wah-wah, really. It sort of changes from, you know,
right.
That sort of thing.
That's exactly it.
You know, as you move it, and it's
Yeah,
the
right.
one where probably he's just looking for the most sort of clear treble, possibly.
Right.
You know.
And we talked about AC30s. Obviously, you've worked with a geeky amp as well.
Yeah.
What's that like to work with?
It's fun. I mean, one of the things that's happened quite a lot is that he uses it in the same room. So we've literally in the past, I remember at one point, because obviously if you're trying to record, you don't really want to have headphones on. But how does that work? I mean, yeah, so you're trying to listen to the speakers, and then you've got this thing blaring away behind you. So I think at one point we just chucked a leather jacket over the top of it, you know, and there was a mic in there as well, and that worked very well. And it's often the kind of random things that you do that work very well, you know, they're like what we call happy accidents.
Yeah.
And there are accidents that aren't happy, of course, but just delete those.
I was one.
or clean up another one.
Yeah. Are there many of those? Or?
Not with Brian, really. No.
I guess now though, to us probably, I mean, his rig has not really changed through the years. It's very special treble booster AC30. Wet dry wet now. He has been doing that for a long time. So he has the same approach in the studio, as you said.
Yeah, since I've been working with him, it's stayed pretty much the same. I mean, the rig was slightly different when I first sort of saw it and Jobby was there, there were different kind of choruses, and I think it was an MXR unit of some kind, and maybe you
It was.
know what it was.
There was 2 episodes.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was now, but was it a chorus?
He had it on a chorus setting. It was a rack thing.
Yeah, yeah,
It's in one of the videos.
yeah.
See.
I remember I think on the Headlong session, he was playing that, and that was in the top studio, not in the big hall, that was in the studio upstairs where Under Pressure was recorded.
When you're recording these things and putting it together, is there a feeling from you, can you tell like it's going to be an instant, this is going to be a big hit again, or is that, because clearly some of the songs you mentioned have gone on to be massive and define Queen. Is that something you're aware of when you're working on it, or is it just...
No. I know whether I like them or not. I mean, and no one predicted that Innuendo would be a #1 record. Obviously the band wanted it, everyone wanted it to be, but they want all of their records to be that. So, you know, generally the one you're working on, you have high hopes for, and everyone is very optimistic about it, and that's always the way. Yeah, I mean, it's like that with the movie. We didn't know it was going to be such a massive success. I mean, it's so successful. I mean, it's just blew everything away, didn't it? I mean, I don't know how much money it made in the end, but it's not far off $1 billion.
That's quite a lot, yeah.
I mean, no one had any idea like that.
You were involved in the sound design for that too, and
Yeah.
that won some awards, didn't it? For the...
Yes, some people won Oscars for the sound.
Sorry.
No, it was great to work with that team, and we ended up in LA on Oscar night with me, Josh, and Chris, who are my main colleagues. And we were only there because Queen and Adam played, at the awards. So I was there just to do the TV sound, which is what I always do. And when they perform, live broadcast, that's when we go out and we attend these things. And so that's the only reason I was there. But because they won awards, we went out with them all afterwards and had pictures with the Oscars and everything. It was great fun. Yeah, it's good.
Did you have a cameo in the film? Were you in the crowd or anything?
No, I didn't really go to many of the, in fact, any of the shoots.
Yeah.
Just the initial prep for all the sound that went in. A lot of that had to be done early because they were miming to it when they filmed. So there's a lot of attention to detail on the speeds and everything, and also making sure that they had that other singer, Mark Martel, sort of double Freddie's part, so that Rami could lip sync to the track, and it would work for both Freddie's, and they could then choose to use Freddie's voice or Mark's after the event. There's a lot of work that goes into making that happen.
Yeah, massive. And I'm going to throw the room open to questions in a minute, but is there, for us at home trying to record, is there one bit of solid advice you would give us, or one bit of kit, say, is a must-have?
Guitar.
Guitar, anything for microphone recordings.
Yeah. Not really, no.
Okay. Fair enough.
I mean, you've got it all here. I mean,
just some mics and...
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's like I was saying to one of the chaps here earlier, it probably doesn't matter what mic. If we could put any mic in front of Brian's amp, and it would just sound like Brian. I mean, it doesn't matter what you do.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions from anyone out there?
What was the best advice you've ever been given to do the job that you do?
Don't walk in front of the guitarist when he's playing.
That's pretty good.
When you get the mic on Brian's guitar, do you use you don't use EQ, do you? On an AC30 I'm talking about.
Normally we record it without EQ these days. I mean, with analog you wouldn't really want to add treble in the mix because you're just turning up the hiss.
Yeah.
But these days that's not a problem, so you can add as much or as little later on. And generally we don't record.
Do you filter out the hiss then when you're mixing? Do you filter the hiss out?
No. Well, we mute it when he's not playing very often, but sometimes he likes all the noise. You know, sometimes we'll mute it and he says
we
he
all like
wants
the
to
hiss.
hear it. Sorry?
We all like the hiss.
Yeah, I mean, I like it as well. It feels unnatural to me. You know, some tracks will start with one guitar on one side and one on the other, and you're used to hearing the guitar start and also the hiss start on the other side. If you mute that, which sometimes has been attempted on some remasters, it just sounds weird and horrible. You know.
You can hear the same thing on a lot of the old recordings. There's the hiss coming in
Yeah.
on the tracks, on the
Yeah.
double track.
Yeah, but we'll often EQ in the mix,
Yeah.
depending on what the part is and what it's
To
doing.
blend it in.
Yeah, or to bring it out.
Yeah. And do you use any reverb effects? I've got the impression Brian liked a certain mix of reverbs. Is that a room and close mix?
He doesn't generally. He's not big on reverb by
Perhaps
itself.
ambience in.
No, I know. Yeah. So, in order to get an ambient sound, it's often done with delays. Obviously, there's the obvious thing he does live, but and I mean something like Days of Our Lives, where when he goes high, you get that sort of was it 550 and 1100 delay, and that's often just a left-right with no regen, I think, that one. And often you use some kind of variation of that when he's playing. When we're doing live mixing, we'll often do that with no reverb at all because you don't really need reverb very often, and it just sort of blurs everything a bit quite often.
Do you deal with his live acts then when he's doing a tour? The miking up of them?
Well, so if it's not sounding right, then I'll go onto the stage, and that's happened once where I think somebody, who shall remain nameless, a famous front of the house engineer, wanted to use these mics that were designed in such a way that you could get them the wrong way around, and one of them was the wrong way around.
It's not the ribbon mics, is it?
Well, they ribbon. I'm not sure these ones were. No, it wasn't the ones on from the. I can't remember which tour it was now, but anyway, someone had got them. It just wasn't. You know, the amp was just not present, and so I went on the stage and just saw it instantly and flipped it around and left. And I remember Pete finding that very amusing.
So on Brian's last tour, he had a MD421, close to the cone, the centre of the cone, and then either on the same speaker or sometimes on the next speaker, he had a SE Voodoo 2.
Yeah.
Are you mixing? Are they being mixed together, or is one for one part?
No, it's just being muted. That one. The thing is that maybe the front of house guy or the monitor engineer will want to use that, but I don't want to use it. I've heard it. I just don't need it.
So you're just using the Sennheiser?
Yeah, it's all recorded, but in the mix,
you don't need it in the mix.
I wouldn't use it. No, it doesn't help me.
You talked about recording the band also live setup.
Yeah.
How much was track separation a problem, or did that actually contribute to the overall mix?
Well, it contributes. As I said, with tracks like Innuendo and what have we made? What's it called? Was it all worth it? Another question title.
That was my next question, actually.
Yeah. Does it have a question mark? Yeah, you can hear the ambience. So the ambience is recorded, and that's hugely important to the recording. And if you were to listen to the multi-track, you would hear the bass and the guitar in there as well as the drums. Because often those sounds, on most recordings, people are just recording the drums in that situation, and you just get the drums in the ambience. But yeah, everything's in there. And in fact, you can hear Freddie in those things as well, because he's there too.
Do you use room mics sort of as well as the close mic to get, if you got the guitar isolated somewhere, would you use a room mic as well?
We have done,
or a proximity mic?
Yeah, we don't. It's sort of. I think that was actually what prompted the use of the back mic, is trying to get some kind of more resonance around it, and that gives you that without it opening up or giving you a sort of coloration of a small room, which you don't really want. So, yeah, I mean, I remember with AC/DC's recording, they had all kinds of, they had mics at all different distances and stuff, but they would, they just have one guitar and then one other guitar, and that's it, but with Brian, obviously, there's so many guitars often that it doesn't help having that kind of, small room sound added in, really. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does, yeah, it's great.
Are you at a point where, if you're in a studio and Brian's doing a take, where you would actually say, I think you can do it better, or...
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. And, I think you should tune your guitar.
Yeah.
But sometimes, the recordings aren't perfectly in tune, and if he doubles it, then you get
chorus.
Very natural. You get that is chorus. That equals chorus, isn't it? So yeah, and he's obviously aware of all of these things himself. But yeah, in terms of if he's trying to, I don't know what he's got in his head, so if he's trying to go for a solo on something and he's faced with a new track, it's quite a daunting prospect, isn't it? I've got to create the next Brian May guitar solo for him, and he's got to come up with yet again something new, and it's very easy for people to say, oh, he's just retreading old ground, but he does very often, push the boundaries and try different things, and yeah, so it's never wrong, what he's doing. He has to be allowed to do exactly what he wants to do and make all the experiments he needs without the idea that someone's kind of scoffing or thinking it's bad or wrong or something. So it has to be a positive thing most of the time, but I'll normally encourage him if I feel there's more that can come out.
Yeah.
Certainly. Yeah.
Is the process totally different if you're recording Roger on guitar?
I haven't recorded Roger for decades. I don't know. Yeah, Roger's a very different sort of person. So you'd have to ask Josh, but he's not well at the moment, Josh.
Did you do the recording for Back to the Line?
Yes.
So when you remixed it, were you surprised how different the amps seemed to sound from back then to the way they sound
Well, we
now?
didn't remix it.
Well, remastered it.
So do you think they sound different then?
They seem to. The album, they sound different to me on the album. I've not heard what you've heard. But it's all Brian on his open day thing, and then he mentioned about it. I thought I could hear that as well.
Yeah. I mean, all of these, he's got a lot of these things, obviously, and
Will you see them?
yeah. And, I mean, I remember with sometimes, well, in the beginning of going to his studio, which was in '91, the first time I went there, which is when this is before Freddie went, I think it was September. So it's actually 30 years since I first went there. there were lots of, we were trying to find the amp that sounded best, or we thought sounded best, and we sort of settled on some nice vintage ones. But of course, some of those recordings were done in the 80s, in the late 80s. The initial track for Back to the Light was recorded in 87 or 8 or something. So yeah, I don't know. But and later on, there have been various AC30s that have been, in my view, sort of too, I don't know, souped up or something, where they just sound too fizzy or something, in my view. They don't have that nice kind of burning sound. So all the vintages sound different, I think.
I know what you mean.
Any other questions?
For the movie, you did re-record the solo in Bohemian Rhapsody, right?
The solo?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, because he wanted to play some wrong notes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We all do that.
I'm very good at that.
When you re-recorded, did you make it like it should have been done back in '75? I mean, to me, it sounds like the majority of the sound comes from like behind the amplifier.
In the movie,
Yeah.
or just in the song anyway.
In the song anyway. I mean, if you listen from the original.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, I mean, Brian, he's had it in his head, that it was done a certain way. He thought he knew exactly what setting it was and how it was recorded, and we set it up, and it sounded different. So then he had to try and find a way to make it work. And I think the main difference was actually, it does have a sort of a slight boxiness to it.
Yeah.
I'd describe it as that. And we actually put a lid on top of the, we sort of put it in a box basically, and created a small space around it. I don't think was there an extra mic? I'm not even sure.
Was it just a mic behind the amplifier?
No, there's a mic in front as well,
Oh, okay.
but the mic behind it was crucial.
Yeah.
And in fact, we moved that around to try and to replicate.
So how much is basically behind the amp and how much is in front?
Oh, I wouldn't know.
Roughly, I mean, it's 70 or whatever.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't be more. There wouldn't be more coming from the back than the front. I would say that.
Did you use large condenser mics on that, or did you use, because the original was done reportedly by large condenser mics, one on the front speaker and then one on the back, and it was near a wall, which might account for the boxy.
Yeah, maybe
sound.
it was. Yeah, well, there was a wall that we used that's always there, but no, not condenser mics.
So you used a Sennheiser on the front.
Yeah. I don't remember using anything else. I mean, it's possible, but I don't think so.
Any other questions from anyone? What I would say is Justin's kindly said the same as Ariel. If anyone doesn't feel comfortable talking out loud in a big group, wants to grab him whilst he's here, please do go up to him. He doesn't bite, and ask him some questions. He said, ask him our geeky questions. Just make sure if you get any good answers, you share them with everyone. Justin, thank you so much for coming.
Very welcome.
Right, you can all go and do what you want for a minute, and then next up is Darren Thomas's band section.